Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we do have full champion spotlight for Hawkeye, so we can break down all of his new abilities, everything that has changed. And let's face it, if you look at the old Hawkeye, he literally had like 3 lines in his ability description and a signature ability. There was not much happening with the champion, but he had an amazing level 1 and some decent bleeds, and more is not always better, especially as we are seeing with Guillotine. So we do actually need to pay attention to everything that has been changed, because some of the things have been kind of, dare I use the word, nerfed a bit, at least on the initial glance. So some of the things might not necessarily be as effective. However, there's a ton of things that have changed. Overall, I do think he's going to be better and much more well-rounded champion, and I personally look forward to playtesting him. I do have a high Sig 5-star, I do have Dupe 6-star, so we'll see which copies I use for, initial playtests, but I definitely look forward to it. So, his strengths, power control, and bleed, exactly the two things that he used to do. Weaknesses, bleed immunity, and corner node, as much as it counts as weakness, I suppose. Right, so we have Dialed In, and Dialed In is a brand new mechanic, which is actually extremely interesting. So during special attacks, press the block after the first hit input to slow down time. Releasing the block input precisely when Hawkeye releases the arrow grants a perfect release bonus. I actually like the fact. That means that there's still a bit of creativity left, and there are some new things that can come to the game. And this is kind of like a new mini game within a champion. And I'm sure that with a bit of practice, we're gonna get used to it, and we're gonna be able to hit it, significant portion of time. Just another thing to pay attention to. Activating a perfect release bonus grants a dialed-in passive increasing duration of debuffs inflicted by special attacks by 10%. All dialed-in stacks are removed and failing to activate perfect release bonus max 5. So basically just get an increase in debuff duration, which I think is a perfect way to start testing this sort of mechanic. It's a useful thing, and it's going to come into play later in his kit, but it's not like it's the major thing if you miss it, instead of 11-second bleed, you end up with a 10-second bleed or something. So it's not critical, but it's going to be very interesting. Basic attacks. Pause all bleed effects on opponent for 1 second. Now, I absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. Already can see some very quirky interactions, sometimes with some different nodes and different champions, or at the very least, when you're going to be going up against somebody in arenas with Liquid Courage Double Edge, it will be extremely fun to prolong their double edge damage. So we're going to be having fun with that. Definitely like that. Heavy attacks is slow on heavies. Who doesn't love that? It's a very good utility to add. 10-second slow is not the longest in the world, but it can get the job done. Plus, on top of it, I believe there is synergy that can allow you to significantly extend the duration of this slow, and he can be like full-fledged slow champion. His slow currently is effectively like Yellow Jacket slow, which is also 10 seconds. And it really is not quite long enough in kind of like slow, heavy, reliant matchups, I'll say. But if need be, it can get the job done. And I'm happy that it is there. I'm always happy to find some extra kit of utility on heavy attacks, be that taunt, be that power drain or something. And slow is definitely one of those. Special attacks. Final hit, 100% chance to inflict bleed debuff, dealing 2,369 direct damage over 10 seconds. Each bar of power spent beyond 1 grants +1 bleed and 5-second duration. Now, here we might see the first problem. Because if you look at the face value, so 2,369 damage over 10 seconds, and previously level 1 bleed was 5,780 bleed damage or 5 seconds. So previous bleed is significantly shorter, but also double the strength, which means that the tick, each individual tick effectively would be about 4 times as potent pre-buff. So the initial bleed numbers that you're going to see from like a regular special are going to be like 4 times smaller. However, because they last twice as long, so the damage is halved here on this point. However, thanks to the fact that these bleeds will stack, thanks to the fact that you can pause the bleeds, and you still have access to bleeds now on larger special attacks, plus he will have his perfect release mechanic and guaranteed crits and crit bleeds. If you're doing your job right, you are likely going to be doing more damage than you do right now. But it is important to note that the base bleed on level 1 is effectively half the strength, half the damage that it was. But again, we do have the ability to extend the duration of those bleeds with each of the basic hits. We do have access to crit bleeds and things like that, so the real numbers are likely going to be higher. So I don't want to say that his bleed damage has been nerfed down, even though numbers it has. Now we have perfect release. Arrow attack becomes a guaranteed critical hit, which is quite important because we will be talking about critical bleeds with Hawkeye as well. So there we go, some guaranteed crits on special attacks. Special attack 1, EMP arrow. 100% chance to inflict power drain, removing 75% bar of power. And this reads well, doesn't it? 75% bar of power removed. Well, again, strictly speaking, it used to deal 40% of total power. It sounds less, again, right? But it's 40% of total power. So it used to drain over a bar of power. Or if you convert this to the total power, it drains 25% total power. Oh, wait. Not, yeah, 25. Yeah, 25%. So the power drain has gone down from 40% to 25%, which is a significant reduction, which in itself will mean that it is going to be harder to use Hawkeye in a manner that people have been doing right now to force opponent basically not to throw special attack ever, or similar to that. However, we have this perfect release again, 100% chance to inflict a suppression debuff, reducing opponent's combat power rate by 50% for 8 seconds. So if you do activate the perfect release, the overall your power control is going to be stronger than it was before with level 1s. But again, directly, his base ability has been made weaker, significantly weaker. It went from 40% total to 25% total. And I'm not saying he's not going to be functioning well or he's not going to be a much better champion than he was. But I think it is very, very worth pointing out that, you know, some of the abilities, very few abilities that he had might not necessarily be as potent. Special 2, Incendiary Arrow. 100% chance to inflict a 25-second fragility debuff. Attacking fragile opponent grants 900% critical damage, reducing blow efficiency by 50%. Perfect release, release another one. Again, I'm not a big fan of these fragility debuffs. They do increase your damage, like in your basic combos and stuff like that, and you obviously do still have this bleed that is there. But if we're honest, like, I don't even understand why it's really called Incendiary Arrow. It has nothing to do with Incinerate or Flames, but doesn't. He's likely still going to be Special 1 champ, Special 1 and boss. Special 2, I'm not sure. I plan on using them, but we're going to test it out, but it doesn't seem too critical or impressive. Right, Special 3, Explosive Barrage. All bleeds triggered during this attack gain up to 200% duration based on Hawkeye's critical rating. Based on Hawkeye's critical chance, bleeds triggered during this attack can be critical bleeds, multiplying the bleed potency by Hawkeye's critical damage multiplier. As an immediate first little trick is you will want to dex before you activate the level 3, so you have that precision, and then you're going to have a higher chance to inflict critical bleeds. And keep in mind that this is going to be 3 bleeds with a very, very significant duration because of this first line, because each bar of power spent beyond 1 grants plus 1 bleed and 5-second duration. So you're going to get plus 10-second duration, and you will get 2 extra bleeds. So that level 3 could be quite juicy. Signature ability Hemorrhage. Landing a critical hit with an arrow shot will cause any personal bleed debuff trigger to become critical bleed, multiplying the bleed's potency by Hawkeye's critical damage multiplier. Which is, I suppose, where level 2 comes into play, because fragility increases your critical damage. And also on top of that, that perfect release mechanic here kind of ties it all together, because you do want to have a perfect release, and then your arrow hit is guaranteed to be critical, and when it is critical, you will have a guaranteed critical bleed, which does more damage, which again is a reason why Hawkeye's bleed damage is likely still going to be higher, despite being effectively halved on his level 1. Additionally, each bleed debuff on the opponent reduces their physical resistance by 500, which is, another good generic way how to increase his damage. So I do think his Sig ability is going to be really important to get those crit bleeds going and get like the max damage output. So it's going to be one of those situations where I think Hawkeye will still have his utility if he's unduped, but he's gonna need dupe for significant damage. Similar to how Miles Morales' buff has been, or similar to how Stealth Suit Spider-Man's design. Stealth Suit Spider-Man gains pretty much nothing with his signature ability besides increase in damage, and significant increase in damage. And I think that will be the situation here, where if you have unduped Hawkeye, you'll still be able to use him for the abilities that make him useful in the fight, but the fights can take longer. He has a bunch of new synergies as well, interestingly, with Abomination, Immortal Abomination, Diablo, and King Groot. And I love the good synergy partners. At the moment, Diablo, King Groot, and Immortal Abomination are amazing champions. King Groot's like one of my favorite champions right now to play with. And Arrow Strikes pause all slow debuffs on the opponent for 6 seconds per level of special attack. So you need to drop a heavy attack, use a special attack, and you're going to have very substantial slow that can last, 16 seconds, which is good. It's a good amount of time to last, which already makes that slow potent and usable in a real fight. With MODOK, Old Man Logan, Wolverine X-23, and Wolverine, not the best synergy partners if you ask me, but also not the best synergy. Arrow Strikes remove all rock stacks and rock charges, so it's against Korg and Thing, basically. Shield, now I do absolutely love this synergy. Nick Fury, Black Widow, Deadly Origins, and Quake. Because it's a synergy with Nick Fury, it's a synergy with Quake, and then you add in like the Deadpool X-Force in there for the healing, and then even if you run Liquid Courage Double Edge, you end up playing with no debuffs active on you because you will be immune to poison against non-mutant champions, and the Deadpool X-Force or Gold Pool and Nick Fury synergy is going to purify the bleed, so I do like that. So he can gain a poison immunity, which is kind of a very weird synergy, but I like it. It's definitely a bit quirky. And that's pretty much it. So what I think about his kit. There are things that I definitely look forward to. The thing that does kind of upset me a bit is that there seems to be a lot of fuffing about for nothing, which kind of describes a lot of MCOC champions these days. Like, we can literally compare a champion, how he was, like, 3 lines of abilities, and, these abilities arguably, especially the power drain, is or can be more effective than it's going to be. What a lot of that has done, it's taken this 1 line of text, swapped it into 8 lines of text, and made it, on paper, somewhat as potent power drain as it was. And similarly with bleeds, they added like many mechanics where you can pause the bleeds, you increase the duration, you have this perfect release, but they have the damage, which they might have to do, but it's just seemingly a lot of complex stuff happening in Hawkeye for not that many things to change. Like, what does, like, realistically, what new Hawkeye does? If we break to it, what new abilities he gets? Slow. That's it. They added slow on his heavy attack, which is like the shortest thing in here, the easiest thing to understand, but that is the new thing. Everything else, with all of this long ability description, bleed, or more damage and less damage, like fragility debuff. Your crits are high, and I understand that it all ties up together to deal more or less damage, but it doesn't really add anything to a champion. What were Hawkeye's abilities before the buff? Power control and bleed. What are Hawkeye's abilities after the buff? Power control and bleed, and slow on heavy attack. And the poison immunity with the synergy. So a lot of this text, okay, critical bleed. Critical bleed is still a bleed. If it's a bleed immune champion. Or, suppression debuff. Suppression debuff is a form of power control. Well, kind of shittier form of power control, because this has been made weaker, but this lets it double up. So, I like the new mechanic. I hope that he can do quite a lot of damage, especially with like Hercules synergy, getting those Furies and all that other stuff. But I don't like the idea behind the design itself. They go taking 3 lines of text and turned it into 50 lines of text, which probably will do more damage and, you know, make the appearance of much more modern champion, but he still does exactly the same thing after the buff. Hope he's good. Hope his damage is good. Hope he's easy to play. But again, Hawkeye, after the buff, still gonna be Hawkeye. Bleed and power control. And slow. You know, and I'm sure we can see all the videos with, oh my god, new mechanic's awesome, or new mechanic's bad, and, you know, Hawkeye's an absolute critical damage god. And that was always kind of like the best thing about Hawkeye. That long synergy list. Cool synergy with Tiger, where he replaces bleeds with poisons. Cool synergies, you know, with Black Widow's Deadly Origins, Hercules, Hitmonkeys, so on and so forth. He synergizes with very cool champions. And I kind of wanted just him to do more. We'll see what happens. I'm sure he's going to do more damage, though. Because his entire changing kit is centered around damage. Right, but that is more or less all that I think about Hawkeye. Some good things, some bad things, but obviously, ultimately, it's all going to come down to when the buffs go live, when we test it, and how it's going to feel. Let me know what you guys think, and I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya! Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about